Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 in how to walk the blue line like Makar. And in week 2 or part 2, we're going to do what we do best at Train 2.0, which is break down the mechanics that make the superstars look like magic. And in week 1, we talked about the very typical 10 and 2, otherwise known as the Mohawk, that we see players like Crosby use really, really well. And we talked a lot about how Makar uses that too. And so you can see that, in this example here. So that was the 10 and 2, and we can see how Makar uses it as a defenseman and how he uses it, I think a little differently than a lot of players, especially defensemen, in sort of a unique way. So we talked about living in a 10 and 2. So are you living in a 10 and 2? Did you do the figure eights? If not, you don't want to actually move on. But if you are, if you were living in a 10 and 2 and doing that super easy drill, you've probably noticed how easy it is to maneuver around in a 10 and 2 and all the different movement options that it opens up for you. And so you want to take that into week 2 here, which is getting into the reverse 10 and 2, which is, if you ask yourself what's the opposite of a 10 and 2, well, it's obvious. It's the reverse 10 and 2. So let me show you a couple examples and we'll talk about it. So here's one example here where you can see Makar is using the reverse 10 and 2 on his right foot to adjust how he's walking the blue line, moving laterally. And then we can see it here again, how he's using a reverse 10 and 2 on his left foot, on his right foot there. And then we'll see one more example here where he's using it on his left foot. So you can see the reverse 10 and 2 of his left foot there. So let's talk a little bit about what this reverse 10 and 2 is. Well, the fundamental that we're going to do is we're going to flip things on their head, and the fundamental is the backwards corkscrew. And so what you're going to do, your drill this week is going to be a backwards corkscrew. So we last week talked about how Makar has 10 and 2s, just like Crosby, right? And so we all know that, like, if you were to look at the face of a clock and you were to look at where the 10 is and the 2 is, you'd have your left foot positioned here and it would be pointing at the 10, and then you'd have your right foot here and it'd be pointed at the 2. Now, if you really look at like Crosby and Makar and how a 10 and 2 really works, it's more like a 9 and 3 or like an 8 and 4, or like, but the general idea is the toes are facing away from each other and the heels are facing together. So you often hear this called, a 10 and 2, but you also hear it called the Mohawk. So that is the 10 and 2, that is the Mohawk. Now you've heard, or maybe you've heard at Train 2.0, the term internal hip rotation. And internal hip rotation is the byproduct of a reverse 10 and 2. So we are going to call this a reverse 10 and 2, or maybe we call it the no-hawk. You heard it here first. So if you start seeing this on Instagram, you heard it here first. Just remember the time you watch this video. So in a reverse 10 and 2, what you get is you get your right foot actually facing at the 10 and you get your left foot facing at the 2. So it's a reversal. It's a crossing. And so if we pay attention here, let's go back to this clip. We'll make it big screen. We've got the left foot facing to the 2, right? And then if we look here, we can see the right foot right on this step right here. We've got right foot is going to be facing there to the 10. And then we'll take a look here again, and you'll see the same thing. The right foot is going to face right there across to the 10. So it's a crossing of the 10 and 2. It's a reverse 10 and 2. And what this really is, like I said, internal hip rotation. But rather than talking about it at the hips, and the reason we don't talk about it at the hips is because hips are a very confusing thing. They can be tilting, twisting, they can be flexing, they can be internal rotating, external rotating. So while the hips are a super important thing that must be fluid, that must be in harmony with the rest of the body, it's hard to use them for coaching. Whereas footwork is easier to describe. And when it's easier to describe, it's easier to understand. And when it's easier to understand, it's easier for you to go and implement. So that's why we're using this new language called the reverse 10 and 2, or maybe it's no hawk. And what we're going to practice, what we're going to work on to develop this no-hawk ability, or this reverse 10 and 2 ability, is the backwards corkscrew. So it's literally the exact same as the forward corkscrew, but it's literally just doing it backwards. And you can see, in order to generate my backward movement, you need to actually generate that reverse 10 and 2, where the left foot faces to the 2 and where the right foot actually faces to the 10. So you'll see that right there. So that is your on-ice drill. You can also do this on Mars blades, roller blades, whatever. But that is how you're going to begin to develop this ability for yourself, the reverse 10 and 2 ability. And don't worry, we'll take this much further and blend this all together in the coming weeks. But this is all just about the fundamentals. It's just about building the fundamentals. Now, the second drill you're going to do is an off-ice drill. And so essentially what you can just do is you can just stand there and you can practice pointing your left foot to the 2 and then your right foot to the 10. And as you can see, that brings it into internal rotation. And then you can step back out so the left foot faces to the 10 and the right foot faces to the 2, just like the clock. And that's your typical 10 and 2. So there's internal rotation, and that's the reverse 10 and 2. And then there's the external rotation, and then the normal 10 and 2. Now you'll notice a couple things as I do this and this, is that is the same as what Makar is doing like this, where he's rotating that hip and foot so that the left foot faces to the 2, and here it's just like where the right foot faces to the 10. So he's closing that hip, or internally rotating that hip. And we've talked about, with internal hip rotation, that language before, but this is better language. This is better language because it's easier to understand, and it has this visual nature to it. So when it's easier to understand, it's easier to practice. When it's easy to practice, it's easy to actually execute in a game. So one last note on the reverse 10 and 2 and on internal hip rotation is that when you often hear, trainers or coaches criticize, knees being collapsed, otherwise known as a valgus knee alignment. And I want to show you how the reverse 10 and 2 is actually different from valgus knee alignment. So if you look at this right here, it looks right in that moment there that Makar actually has a valgus knee alignment. So if you actually pause it, right here, what you see is it looks that knee is collapsed in. So it looks like it's like here and then collapsed in. However, what's actually happening is that that's actually the reverse 10 and 2 movement. So what you're actually seeing is you're seeing this left foot face across. So let's look at that in slow motion here off the ice. So when I'm doing this, I'm not in valgus knee alignment. The knee is actually perfectly aligned, but you can see it looks like it's valgus knee alignment because of the internal rotation. So what's really cool, and you can see this looks like varus alignment, meaning your knees are out. And then this looks like valgus, and then it looks like valgus. But what's actually happening is you're just looking at a bent knee from a side view because you've actually rotated the leg. So it's not actually a valgus knee alignment. What it is it's internal hip rotation that looks like valgus knee alignment. And that's why you see some of these really great young players like Makar, like Hughes, like Eichel, like a lot of these players, they often look like they have a valgus knee alignment when what they're actually doing is a reverse 10 and 2, and their toes are pointing in and they have internal hip rotation. So it's a very different approach to the movement coaching that you often hear. So I just wanted to show that because it kind of explains what's going on with some of these top NHL players. So just a quick review, that the fundamental you'll work on is the backwards corkscrew, and I've given you an off-ice drill, an on-ice or rollerblade drill. But this is the visual you want to keep in mind here, is the 10 and 2 and how it's different from the reverse 10 and 2. And this week we're working on the reverse 10 and 2. So you're going to want to get really good at both the backwards corkscrew and doing that little off-ice drill, because in next week we're going to talk about the forward and backwards corkscrew. And what we're talking about with the 10 and 2 and reverse 10 and 2 is going to feed directly into that. And that is week 3, or part 3, on how to walk the blue line like Makar. And we're going to unpeel another layer of the onion and make it even easier for you to walk the blue line, just like Makar. And it's not magic, it's all mechanics. And, you know, it takes reps, and Makar has done it and does it so well. And you can learn it too. It just requires the breakdown and the repetition. So really excited to get into week 3 with you. Really practice that reverse 10 and 2 and that internal hip rotation, and we'll see you in part 3. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching this free downhill skating system 4 lesson. And if you'd like to see the full unified system, the full downhill skating system 4 that will transform your mechanics and really unlock the next level of your game, all working together as a system. So all the lessons are linked up and you get the full picture, really leaving no stone left unturned, then I'd love for you to join the Train 2.0 Plus membership, where you'll get access to Downhill Skating System 4, and you'll get access to all the videos and everything unlocked. You'll also get access to the community and our private Facebook group, where we're constantly sharing and connecting with other downhill skating system players. So if that's something you want to do, I invite you to start your either your free trial or your first month with Downhill Skating System. So click the link to join, and I'd love to see what kind of progress you can make with the full unlock system.